Hi everyone, and welcome to the sew along for the Kelly Kimono Robe. This is a woven pattern, and it's a really versatile pattern in that you can use this as a bathrobe. You could use this as a light summer jacket over your swimming costumes or your togs, your bikinis, or you could use this as a light summer jacket. So there's essentially two hemlines. I'm going to be sewing the shorter version today. So as I mentioned, this is a woven pattern, so the seam allowances I'm using today are 1 centimetre, which is 3/8 of an inch, and I'm going to be using an overlocker to tidy up the raw edge. So my overlocker, I'm going to use 3 threads in. I'm going to use my left needle, my wide overlock needle, upper thread, and my 2 lower loopers. And as well as that, when I use my overlocker, I'm going to overlock on the raw edge of the fabric, so I'm not going to use the blade to do anything more than just trim off any fraying edges or any bits of thread. So when you're ready, make sure you've done a test stitch on spare pieces of fabric. Your stitch length needs to be 20/5, just a nice firm balanced tension, and we'll get started. So I've designed this pattern with an underarm gusset, which means the underneath of the sleeve is open and it will give you more airflow in summer. So you can actually sew this garment in a polyester chiffon and you won't have any problems with overheating or anything like that, because you're going to have the drape and the airflow under the arm. So this is the gusset piece. It's a side insert basically, and you have 2 of them. We've cut a pair. We've cut one out this way and one out this way. So the very first thing we need to do is overlock the top edge, and the top edge is the straight edge, and you'll know it's the top edge because there are notches very close to the upper area. So we're going to start off by overlocking the edge, and remember, we're only going to overlock on the raw edge. We're not going to cut anything off with our blade. So the next thing we're going to do is turn this at the notches, and if you want to, you can use an iron and press that into position, and then we're going to sew a seam through the overlocking line. So when you're ready, make sure that you turn this to the wrong side, and as I said, you may prefer to use an iron and press that seam down into position. I'm just going to use the heat of my hands to heat press that into place. And I'm going to run a seam, well, a hem actually, through my overlocking line from one side to the other. There's no need to back tack because we will be enclosing this in the seam allowance down the track. So this is called finger pressing. I'm just using the heat of my my fingers or my hands to press that into position. And put those away somewhere safe while we work on the sleeves. So the sleeves are pretty much the same for both versions. Let's just look at them. On one long edge we have some notches. A single notch for the front, a single notch in the middle which will sew to the shoulder line, and then we have a double notch for the back. So effectively the edge with the notches in it is the armhole. For view A, what we're going to do is leave this edge with the notches alone, but we will overlock the other 3 edges, and then we're going to turn up a hem at 1 centimetre, which is 3/8 of an inch, and stitch that down. So if you're sewing view A, go ahead and overlock those 3 edges, leaving this one that has the notches in it alone, and stitch a hem down. Now I'm going to sew view B. For view B we have a cuff, so for view B what we're going to do is only overlock the short edges and sew a hem for the short edges. So when you're ready, come to your overlocker and just overlock those short edges remember to do that for the other sleeve as well. So go to your iron and press that at 1 centimetre, which is 3/8 of an inch, and then we'll plain sew it. So here is our band. Depending on your fabric, you may or may not need to fuse these sleeve bands, just like you may or may not need to fuse the centre front band. The fabric I'm working with today is in, I believe it's a poly cotton blend embroidery anglaise. I'm not fusing it because you'll be able to see the fuse through it. I could put an interlining in there and fuse that and do all sorts of things, but I don't really think that you need fuse for this pattern. But it depends on the type of fabric. So the centre front band you may feel you need to fuse as well. This is entirely up to you. Generally we do fuse bands, but for this type of garment it might not be necessary. Right, so what we're going to do is take one of the bands and making sure you know which is the right side, we're going to fold it right sides together and we're going to stitch these ends at 1 centimetre. Making sure we do the other side as well. When you do this, you may prefer to do it from the fold to the edge. Okay, so turn that through and then do exactly the same thing to the band and go to your iron and give them a press. Okay, so now we're going to take our sleeve and we're going to come to the raw edge, the one that does not have all those notches in it. Place it right side up and take one of your sleeve bands and place it right sides down. And we're going to sew this with a 1 centimetre seam allowance together. And you want to make sure the edges match nicely. So 1 centimetre is 3/8 of an inch. Now at the midway point you will have a notch to match. Which is here. So match that notch to the notch there on the band. And you'll find it easier to do this with the band on top. remember to back tack at the end. Okay, so when you're ready, go and overlock that edge to tidy it, and repeat for the other sleeve. So when you've overlocked it, it will look like this. What we're going to do now is just go to your iron and press this. So we'll be pressing this band towards the body, and after you've done that, just cut this overlocking thread back to 1 inch, which is 2.5 centimeters. What I'm going to do is just tuck that overlocking line in like that, and then what I'm going to do is just stitch directly on top of my stitching here, just a couple of stitches to tack that down into place, forwards and backwards, and that'll just make sure that that sits in the right direction. Of course, if you've got any stray threads, you can just tidy them off afterwards, like so. So you'll do that for that end, and for the other end, tuck it down. If you prefer to, you can do it from the right side. I'm just stitching directly on top of the stitching line here, just a couple of stitches. Okay, and don't forget to repeat that. Trim away any stray threads, and don't forget to repeat that on the other sleeve. Make sure you've pressed that down. So this is what we're looking for at the sleeve hem area, the band area, and of course it has the band, so you could sew this in a contrast colour if you wanted to. I did think about putting this in a like a white chiffon to do a nice little contrast here. I thought maybe this would look nice in chiffon with the belt and maybe the front band as well, but I changed my mind. But certainly because it's got bands, you have possibilities of making this in 2 different fabrics. So when you're ready, let's put that away somewhere safe and we can sew the belt loops, and we can sew the belt as well. So here are our belt loop pieces. It's nice and simple. Fold them in half lengthwise, and then stitch a seam at 1 centimeter, which is 3/8 of an inch. Remember to back tack. And it's really handy if you have one of these loop turners. Makes life very easy. You just hook that through, close it and pull through. Now, the alternative is, if you're going to have as much trouble as I just did with that, which I was not expecting, I guess the firmness of the fabric is the issue there. Yes, probably is. Okay, so go ahead and give that a press. Now, if you don't want to go to that effort, what you can do is fold that to the center, fold that to the center, press it, fold them over again like that, and then stitch it there and there. Your choice. I don't like the bulk of that, so I'm going to just continue with the method, but that is certainly an option if you don't have a loop turner. So right sides together, match the raw edges, stitch at 1 centimeter with a back tack at the beginning and the end. And yes, this loop turner is curved because I often use it for pulling cords through on hoods, so it's easier to keep it curved. There we go, that one went through a lot easier. Okay, so when you're ready, press those, make sure they're all nicely pushed through. So you want to make sure that that seam is right on the edge, and then press it nice and flat and put them away somewhere safe. With our belt, same thing. Now with the belt, you're going to need an area left open to turn this through. I tend to come to around about midway and then come back by about 4 inches, which is 10 centimeters, and start there. It's entirely up to you. The main thing you want to make sure with the belt is that when you sew it, you're sewing it right sides together. So what I'm going to do here, now this belt on this version I've shortened just slightly because I actually want to wear this and I didn't want to have it, I wanted to leave it tied open at the, sorry, how do I describe this? I wanted to wear this garment with the belt tied together at the back so it's always left drapey and open at the front. So for me there was no real point in having a big long belt, so I shortened this pattern piece a little bit. Now clearly I have not cut that properly, or that would match beautifully, but we're going to stitch that by 1 centimeter down. We're going to stop 1 centimeter up and 1 centimeter in, enough to lift, turn and pivot. And we're going to stitch down the side of the belt. Now, I don't like to leave the turning in the centre, but what I might do is just leave a turning position here. So come to whatever point you want and then back tack. Then you want to leave a gap. Now depending on your fabric will depend on the amount of gap you need. I believe you need at least 4 inches, which is 10 centimetres, but it's entirely up to you. So leave a gap and then back tack again. Forwards 3, back 3 at 1 centimetre, which is 3/8 of an inch from the raw edge, and continue stitching. So we want to stop around about 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch from the edge here. We want to lift, turn and pivot that. Rearrange our work in a straight line here, and then stitch up to the edge of the fold and back tack off. Right, so now some people prefer to trim that back slightly, which is always a good idea if you have bulk. That will just help you with a nice sharp corner. So you want to stitch, you want to cut up to the stitching but not through the stitching. You want to leave maybe 1 millimetre or 2, so maybe 1/16 of an inch from the edge, and you do not want to cut through. So find your turning position, which is the part that you did not stitch down here, and start turning this through. This part can take a while. I'll be back to you shortly. Right, so once you've turned your belt through, it's going to look something like this. It's a good idea to go to your iron and press this flat, so make sure that that edge that you've sewn together is right on the edge, and then iron that flat. And you'll also have this area here to deal with. So all you need to do with that is make sure it's ironed in by 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch. So when you press it, it'll have a lovely fold on that edge, so it'll look something similar to this. And then come back to your machine, and at the beginning and end do a small, of the opening, just do a small back tack, and then just edge stitch that closed, making sure it's right on the edge. And you won't even notice that that's been an opening. Right, so now we're going to put it all together. Place the back right side up, and then we're going to match the shoulder area. So take your front and place it right side down. So we're going to sew the shoulders together, this short seam here, with a 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch seam, and then we're going to overlock tidy the edge. So what we're looking for is the the cutout square-ish part to the side. Okay, so when you're ready, match those edges and sew them. Remembering to back tack. So there's one shoulder done, and then just come straight over and do the other shoulder. Now let's overlock. Now we're going to sew the side seams, and if you're using belt loops, now's the time to find them. The belt loop position, this is the side seam here, is the notch just down the side seam here, so it's just up from this curved edge. So at the moment what I've got is my pieces right sides together. I'm going to fold my belt loop in half like this, and I'm going to find that notch here, which is down from the side seam, and I'm going to tack stitch that into place like this. It doesn't matter whether you stitch it to the front or the back, because it's going to be enclosed in the same seam. So I'm just tack stitching that within the seam allowance, so when this is sewn together like that, it will all match up. So you can tack stitch it together and then sew that seam, or just sew it in as you go, entirely up to you. But whatever you do, once you've got the belt loops in place, we're going to sew that seam. And just be careful when you go over the top of it, because it is bulky. We're going to sew this at 1 centimetre. And 1 centimetre is 3/8 of an inch. And that should be what it looks like at the bottom edge here. So when you've done this side seam, I'm going to go to the other, so right sides together. Here's my other loop. So the other way you could do it is this, just put those pieces together, back tack, stitch a short way, find the notch position here, like so. Now of course that is better if it does have some reinforcing, but entirely up to you. Once you've sewn those into place, go ahead to your overlocker and overlock them into position. So just be careful with the overlocker when you do come to this belt loop position, because it may be bulky. And tidy the other side as well. Okay, so next we're going to move on to sewing the gusset. So you're going to need one of your gusset pieces, and we'll take our garment back to our plain sewing machine. Okay, so this is the body of our garment, and I'm just going to arrange my work so you can see it a little easier. Okay, So here is the side seam we've just sewn in. And here is our belt loop. The first thing we need to make sure is that we have this right side up and that the bulk of the seam is facing towards the back. Next we're going to take our gusset piece and place it right side down like so. Now we're going to sew the seam across here. What we need to do is match the notch in the center of the gusset to the side seam here perfectly, and pin that into position like this. And what you will find at each end is this overlaps by 2 centimeters, so that's 2 lots of the seam allowance, so 2 lots of 3/8 of an inch. So once you've got this in the place it needs to be here, making sure that seam is facing towards the back, just turn it sideways like this. The position we're stitching from is 1 centimeter in from either edge here, so it's approximately here. That's our start position, that's where our needle needs to go in and where we need to back tack from. And that is going to sew to a position that is, if you drew a line continuing this line here and drew a line continuing this line here, it's down 1 and across 1. And it should all pretty much, if you've cut these perfectly, work out fine. So that position there, 3/8 of an inch in and down, when you put it down, should be approximately 3/8 of an inch over into the seam there. So all we need to do is make sure we put our needle down exactly in that position. So we're looking at that point there. So when you've done that, just go forward 3 and back tack 3 and then continue stitching across to the center. Don't run over your pin or you'll probably break your needle. Right. And we're going to do exactly the same to the same point on the other side. Now there is an angle here, so you may need to lift this up and just move it slightly. And we're going to stop 1 centimeter before the edge and back tack. And that is our gusset put into position like that. So what we need to do now, because we're going to sew the sleeve and the gusset in at exactly the same time, is we need to clip the corners. But the corner we're clipping is not the gusset, it's the body of the garment underneath. So when you're ready, just flip this over so that the gusset is on the bottom. So you might not be able to see this particularly well, but that is where my stitching stops there. And this gusset is going to be brought up and into place like this. But in order to get the best possible stitching outcome, what we're going to do is just clip the corner slightly. So we're going to clip from exactly the inside corner here to where our stitching starts or stops. But we're going to leave about 1 or 2 millimeters, so about 1/16 of an inch. So what we want to do is cut up to the stitching, but not through the stitching. So it's really just, and we only want it on the body of the garment. So it's just a really small little ease point like that, and that will just give us enough to help us turn this. So do that on one side, and then do that on the other there. And you just want it through that one layer of fabric, like so. And what that means is when we sew the sleeve into position, it just gives us a little bit more leverage room. You can see how that comes up like that nicely. Okay, so now we're going to sew the sleeve and the gusset in at the same time. Okay, so now we're going to sew the gusset and the sleeve all at once, but it's best to pin this into place before we start. So we need to now find the edges with all the notches in it. The first notch was to show us the front, there was another notch for the center and double notches for the back. So take your garment and place it right side up, and this is the front here, and this is the back here. Now take a matching sleeve, and we want to make sure that the sleeve is right side to the front, so it's wrong side up. Can you see the hem there? We want the hem to be facing us. We've got that is right side and that is right side together. Alright, so if we place the sleeve to the bottom of the gusset here, what we're going to find is the single notch here will match to a notch here on the front of the garment. And look, when we go to sew this in, look what's going to happen. This piece is going to sew, and the top of it is going to be exactly on that notch there as well. But I won't worry about that for the moment, because what we have to do is twist it around like that to sew it into place. Let's just get these notches in the right place. So the next notch here for the centre sews to the shoulder seam, and make sure the bulk of that faces towards the back. And we'll pin that into place as well. And then as we come down, our double notches will match double notches on the back of the garment. And if everything's in the correct place, what is going to happen is that the bottom of the sleeve will match directly to the end here, and then that will come up like that. And then there will be a notch that matches there as well. So for now, let's just make sure everything's pinned into place correctly. And you will find it easier to make sure it's held in. So the bottom here needs to be jammed right to that corner that we just clipped. And then what happens is this gusset just folds on over the top. Match those three edges like so. And then as we come up, you'll find that that gusset matches to notches there. All the way up to our shoulder seam here. Making sure the pins hold everything into place nicely. And then just continue pinning your work all the way through to the other side here, making sure that's right to the edge, and then this gusset will fold back over like so, and the top of the gusset will match to the pin there. Alright, so once everything is pinned into place, this is what it's going to look like, and now we have to sew. So we're not going to sew the bottom of the gusset, we're just going to sew from one side of it to the other, so the area that we clipped on an angle. So it's easier if you do this with the gusset on the top. And what you need to do is start at the side that you clipped, and that will have created the way that you can turn the gusset open. And we're going to start exactly at the corner that we clipped into. So you need to make sure your needle is right down there. And we're sewing at 1 centimetre, which is 3/8 of an inch. So making sure all three layers are all nicely together, we're going to back tack to begin, and then sewing around. So we're sewing up the side of the gusset, now we're at 2 layers only. I'm now passing the shoulder seam, and I want to make sure that the bulk of that seam faces towards the back of the garment. gone to 3 layers now. And I'm going to come all the way down. And I'm going to stop right in the corner there. Okay, so repeat that on the other side, and then we're going to overlock that entire seam. Actually, before we go and overlock it, let's just check that it's all done correctly. If you've done everything correctly, this seam here will be butted into the corner there, and everything will be sewn fine. And we'll have a look at it on the other side. Whoops. That seam is all butted through. Oh, there's a couple of stray threads there. Get rid of those. But that's what we're looking for. We want that to be butted into the bottom of the gusset, just like that. Okay, so if that's what it's looking like, we can go to our overlocker and tidy up the raw edge. So we're going to overlock right around this. You just want to be a little bit careful. I'm going to start overlocking this at the bottom, and I'm going to make sure that the gusset's on the bottom, just because I want to be very careful with those edges that we clipped, because I don't want to end up overlocking anything off I shouldn't. So I'm going to start across the bottom, and then I'll overlock all round those sides. Be really careful. Okay, so if you haven't done it already, go ahead and repeat that for the other side. Right, find your band pieces and place them right sides together at this edge that's got like the angle cut out of it. So we're going to sew these together at 1 centimetre, which is 3/8 of an inch, remembering to back tack. So we're going to stitch like this till we get directly opposite the centre, and then we're going to stop with our needle down in our work, lift, turn and pivot, and stitch to the other side, and then back tack. So when this opens out, we're going to end up with an angle like that. So go to your iron and press that open like so. And then fold it like that. So that's what we want to end up with. So this is the centre back neck point, and that's to give us a bit of a curve at the centre back without, so it's not all gapy, so that will just close up any gapiness there. Okay, so the other place we need to do the same thing to is making sure right sides are together. We're going to fold that like so and stitch at 1 centimetre. And then turn that through, and the same thing for the other end. Right sides together. Okay, so give that a really good press in half lengthwise, so it's nice and flat like that. So here is the centre back neck area. What I've done is I've just taken off that really sharp pointed area with my shears. So all I've done is just slightly trim off the edges. Because this is going to sit up and we want it to snug into the neck, when we sew it we don't want to sew to a point and have a sharp point. We just want it to be a nice gentle curve. So I'd just like you to smooth off that edge there. So regardless of which view you are sewing, the hem and the band will still sew the same way. The difference is the curve. So what we're going to do is just overlock tidy the hemline from centre front to centre front. Okay, place your garment right side up and take your band, and what we want to do is match all of these cut edges together. So at the lower edge you'll see a notch here and you'll see a notch here, so those two notches need to match, and when they match what you will find is there is a difference here of 1 centimetre, which is 3/8 of an inch, which is perfect because that is our hem allowance. Haha, we are almost finished. So what we're going to do is place the band to the front and then just come to this edge and just wrap that over here, and we're going to sew at 1 centimetre, which is 3/8 of an inch. I'll just sew a short way and show you why we're doing this. Because when we turn this through, that will give us a lovely perfect edge for our hem to sew on. Of course you could sew it the way we sewed the band, or you could sew the band this way as well, entirely up to you. But what we're going to do is just continue sewing this band to the front. It's really, really important that you match notches as you go. So we have a notch which is our centre back neck, which will match to the seam line we just sewed. We have a notch that will match to our shoulders, and we need to make sure when we get to that our seam is facing towards the back. And then as we complete the front, there will also be a notch to match as we go. And that's around about halfway. And that will just make sure that we don't have any twisting or tunnelling as we go. It just keeps the tensions. Now if you have problems with this, just make sure you lift up and release that presser foot to just distribute the tension as we go. So you could sew a couple of stitches, then rearrange your work and keep sewing. So this is my notch position here. It's approximately halfway up the front. Just make sure we keep that gentle curve going all the way up to the shoulder seam. So we have notches here that match to that shoulder seam. And then this will match all the way through to the centre back, which is there. And back to the other side, making sure that seam is facing towards the back. Now because of that curve I seem to have got some stretching, so I might just have to lift that presser foot up to just distribute the tension there. Or I might have just cut that, so oh no, that's fine, it might just be the fabric I've chosen is slightly shifted, so I'll just make sure I don't end up with any puckers. And then when we get to the end on the other side, just don't forget to roll that up slightly over the edge and stitch through and back tack. Right, so now go to your overlocker and overlock that edge to secure it. So the last thing we need to do is our hem. So come to the hem position and press this up to the wrong side by 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch, and we're going to stitch the hem in directly through the overlocking line. So you'll be doing this exactly the same for both versions. The only difference is the shorter version has a high-low hem on it. And just be a little bit careful as you go. If you find that this is puckering or causing tunnelling, you can reduce that hemline down slightly just to help that. Just make sure when you end it, you end directly on the stitch line here, and remember to back tack, and make sure you do some quality control work, which means trimming our threads and pressing, and your garment is finished. And thanks very much for joining me for the sew along. I hope you enjoy this pattern. It's certainly like a designer take on your classic kimono. That gusset just takes it to another level. I hope you enjoy sewing it and you've learnt some new techniques, and join me again soon for my next sew along video. And don't forget to join my Facebook pattern discussion group, the link's on the website, so you can keep up to date with what's happening and get notification of the latest releases. See you soon.